What's up everyone, I'm Eldridge, and today we're going to look at the Tier 3 Premium Cruiser Aurora! The Aurora is a Russian pallada-class cruiser. She was laid down on the 23rd of May 1897, launched on the 11th May of 1900, and commissioned on the 29th July 1903. In November of 1903, she joined the Russian Pacific Fleet, but had to be repaired a few times along the way due to lingering technical issues. When the Russo-Japanese War began, she was sent back to the Baltic for refitting, and then joined the 2nd Pacific Squadron, formed from the Baltic Fleet. During the Dogger Bank incident, when the Russian 2nd Squadron mistook British fishermen for Imperial Japanese forces and opened fire, the Aurora sustained several hits from friendly ships, and her chaplain was killed in action. On the 27th and 28th of May 1905, during the Battle of Tsushima, the Aurora sustained damage, and her captain, as well as 14 sailors, were killed in action. The crew was able to escape with the ship to neutral Manila, where the United States interned Aurora until the end of the war. She returned to the Baltic in 1906 and became a cadet training ship. Aurora was used for patrols and shore bombardments during World War I. In 1917, the crew joined the February Revolution, and later the Bolsheviks, who were preparing for Communist Revolution, after which she was placed in reserve in 1918. But she was brought back into service in 1921, once again as a training ship. During World War II, due to her obsolete nature, her guns were taken off and used in the land defense of Leningrad. She sunk in the harbor on 30th December 1941, after several bombings and shellings. After the war, she was repaired and permanently anchored in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, as a monument to the October Socialist Revolution, and became a museum ship in 1957, where she still stands today. When comparing the Aurora stats, it of course makes the most sense to compare it to the St. Louis, seeing how the ships are both Tier 3 cruisers and how they are so very similar. The Aurora comes with only 22,500 hit points, whereas the St. Louis has 29,500. That's an increase of 7,000 hit points, meaning the St. Louis has almost a third more hit points than the Aurora. The armor profile of these two ships is very similar, and while the St. Louis has a slight edge in its citadel armor, the citadel on both of these ships are very small and very hard to hit. It should be mentioned, however, that the Aurora's armored deck is 51mm all the way across, whereas the St. Louis has patches of weaker armor. Sadly, the Aurora has only 20 knots top speed, which makes her the slowest ship at Tier 3. Even the Kawachi is faster than the Aurora. The St. Louis with 22 knots top speed isn't incredibly fast, but sometimes when playing the Aurora, it really feels as though you're driving only at half speed. Both of these ships' turning circles are very similar, and they have the exact same rudder shift time. But when I was playing the Aurora, there was one problem that was really bugging me, and it caused me to include another stat in this category, and that is engine power. The Aurora has 12,000 horsepowers, whereas the St. Louis has 24,000. And this is a significant problem on the Aurora. Whereas reducing your speed or increasing your speed is a valid tactic for avoiding torpedoes on many other ships, the Aurora has such a slow acceleration speed that it just doesn't work. Yes, you can sometimes stop in time for torpedoes to just pass you by, but getting the ship going afterwards is going to take you something like 15 to 20 seconds. Both the Aurora and the St. Louis will be detected at 11 kilometers by ships and at 6.3 kilometers by planes. The guns on these two ships are very deceptive. I mean, they both have 14 152mm guns. One would think they would be practically the same, right? Not really. The Aurora has slightly higher range than the St. Louis, although the difference is only 800 meters. And as I already said in my Murmansk review, I have a feeling that this range increase might be a flavor decision for the Russian ships. However, there is a very significant difference in the ammunition these ships use. While the St. Louis with 1440 HE damage does only 20 damage more than the Aurora with its HE shells, the St. Louis's AP shells do a solid 320 max damage more than the Aurora's. And that, combined with the slightly higher rate of fire on the St. Louis, adds up to quite a significant loss in DPS, which may not be so prominent on the HE rounds, but is definitely noticeable in the AP. The Aurora's turrets turn very slowly, again something that I think might be a flavor of the Russian tree. But 13.5 seconds is actually quite significant, and in some cases can be a real problem. Something that isn't reflected in the stats is that the Aurora has very low velocity on its guns, meaning its shells arc much higher to hit the target, And this apparently also results in much lower penetration on its AP rounds, as it is very difficult to do any significant damage with AP rounds on the Aurora. Sadly, Wargaming elects not to show us these stats, but I can show you in the clips later. The anti-aircraft on both of these ships is garbage, and that's fine because they're a tier 3. The St. Louis has 18 76.2mm guns, 9 of which are mounted on each side, with a 2.5 kilometer engagement range, whereas the Aurora has absolutely no secondary guns whatsoever. While the secondary guns on the St. Louis aren't amazing, they can do that extra little bit of damage that you need to kill a destroyer before he torpedoes in your face. Even though they're so similar in armor profile, because the St. Louis comes with 7,000 extra hit points, it clearly wins survivability. Lowest top speed in the game? Check. The kind of horsepower that other nations have in the destroyers? Check. Very unspectacular turning circle and rudder shift? Check. That point goes to the St. Louis as well. With both ships having the same detectability, and that detectability being very average, nobody scores in concealment. Because of its higher shell damage, higher rate of fire, and the resulting higher DPS, faster gun traverse, as well as its higher shell velocity and presumably higher AP ammo penetration, the St. Louis secures a landslide victory in the gun category. New rule, I am not handing out points in the AA category at any tier if the DPS is below 50. Having 9 76.2mm guns on each side is actually really good for a cruiser, and it definitely beats none, so that's another point to the St. Louis. Leaving us with an 0-4. Now that sounds almost as harsh as what the Germans did to the Brazilians in the World Cup. Let's see if that's actually reflected in the gameplay. The first thing that needs to be said is that this ship is incredibly slow, and when that happens, you might as well do this. The second thing I need to make absolutely clear is how awful the AP ammunition is on this ship. It is... I don't think I've ever seen ammunition on any ship that is as bad as the AP on this. Look at what's happening here. This is a Yubari, okay? A light tier 4 cruiser that is practically unarmored. And I am firing at him and constantly hitting my salvos because this guy isn't even moving. Yes, I flunked that one salvo, but still. I am putting so much ammunition into this guy, and I am barely doing any damage. A St. Louis would have crushed this guy without even blinking an eye. But the Aurora just doesn't penetrate him. Like, I just do insignificant damage after insignificant damage. You know, like, I consistently get 5 to 6 hits in every one of these salvos, and he just doesn't die. That is a real issue, and it's caused me to just not use AP ammo at all on this ship, because I've just never found it to be useful. The HE ammunition is just outright better. And this is a closer look. I'm in a one-on-one fight against the St. Louis. Look at what happens when I fire my AP. Like, 100-something damage. I decide to switch to HE because I had enough. And then I fire one salvo. Over 1,000 and critical damage. And I fire another salvo. I flunk one shot, but... bam. So as always, I played 10 games, and this is the best game I could come up with. And we're starting 2 minutes into the game. 2 minutes, because this ship is so incredibly slow. Look at where my allies are. They're already capturing point C. Some of them already made it almost to point A, and I'm barely out of our deployment zone. It's tragic. I start opening up fire at this Yubari, because I love shooting Yubaris. They're my favorite targets. Although you're not actually that good at killing them in the Aurora, sadly. But doesn't matter. Shoot him anyway, because he deserves it for not following my advice and buying that ship anyway. Now, I do have to say one thing. Ever since I switched to the purely HE round situation, as you just saw, I have been doing a lot better in the Aurora. It does have... I mean, look at this. It's pretty nice damage. I just hit this guy for 2,000 and I crippled his engine. That's really, really damn good. But it's still just 2,000 damage. You know, you could do so much more with a ship that fires AP ammunition. However, it does have the implication that once the patch hits, this might actually be a sleeper hit, because Wargaming is buffing high explosive ammunition on practically every ship in the game to bring it a little bit closer to AP, so that, you know, it's not such a non-choice. Because right now, pretty much every ship, you just use AP. That's what you do, because it just does more damage. But because there are ships like this, and I guess because they want to add more ships that work in this way, they're going to buff HE ammunition so that there's more of a choice between HE and AP, and HE actually becomes a viable thing to fire. So when they do that, this ship might become really awesome, because just look at this, you know, I'm barraging these guys, and practically every single salvo I just knock out something. You know, this St. Louis I just started firing, I knocked out his fire control system, now I knocked out a turret, and I set him on fire twice. He repairs it, my next salvo is in the air, and bam, I set him on fire again and knock out another one of his guns. And that's a gun less for an entire minute. My next salvo, boom, knocks out another gun, and re-knocks out his fire control system, crippling his range slightly. That is really, really sweet. And look again, I again killed his one of his guns. So now he's down to 5 guns. That is really, really strong. And I think if I played more with this ship, I could probably get more into the rhythm of just, you know, spamming people with HE ammunition and, you know, basically just being a support. I think if you play this in a platoon with other people who are playing, you know, better ships, then you can definitely still be, you know, of some kind of value by just shooting at ships and you know, taking all of their modules away. This is sadly where it all goes wrong, because I just repaired my ship and he knocks out my steering. So now for 45 seconds I'm going to have to drive in a circle, because I was locked at maximum turning. So I decided to slow down a little bit so that I'm not, you know, cruising in a circle like crazy. And I see if I can maybe fire back at him a little bit, but he decides to hide behind the island like a little bitch. So I'm just delegated to turning around this little island in front of me. Aha, but he makes a mistake and peeks out. So I take my salvo, and I don't even know if I hit him. No, apparently I didn't hit him. Well, that's too bad. I'm very worried, however, at this point in the game, because their team is making a huge push for our deployment, which means they're going to go for our carrier and whatever defense we have around our carriers. I think, yeah, we have 2 cruisers sitting close to our carriers. It's going to be tough for those 2 to defend. However, this Phoenix decides that now would be a great time to just come out and present himself to me. My first salvo doesn't hit, but my second salvo nails him. And the other thing, I mean, it's not so visible right here because the guy is only 7 kilometers away. But as soon as you start firing at longer ranges, the arc on your shots is really crazy and it gets really difficult to actually aim properly. So that's something I really had to get used to. But I pummel this guy and then kaboof. Well, it would have been kaboof if I hadn't totally screwed up that salvo like a donkey. But, you know, that's what you expect when you look at a channel of a guy who's called Cloaking Donkey, right? Like, I mean, that's expected. Good. Finally, though, I managed to actually kill the guy. But shit has just hit the fan. They are in our base. That Yubari I couldn't kill earlier is making a beeline for our carriers. But there's really not that much I can do apart from shoot at these guys as they come into our spawn, because I am slow and I can't turn for crap. So I'm just taking shots at this Yubari, being the biggest ship in our base.
Our team has taken the lead.
And I think the destroyers are so far away I wouldn't hit them anyway. So I take my shots, and sadly they all do tiny poopy amounts of damage, and then he explodes from fire damage presumably, or maybe flooding. But it wasn't mine. Pew, pew, pew. So I fire at this, I think it's an Omaha. Yeah, it's an Omaha. I fire at this Omaha instead. And he finally realizes that I exist and starts going toward me. I give him some fire and step on the gas so I can, you know, get some cover between me and him. He knocks out one of my guns and does some decent damage to me, but I mean, I do relatively good damage back to him, so it's not like I just rolled over and died. However, something very, very shocking and terrible and frustrating is going to happen. And I must admit, I did not see it coming during the game. I should have seen it coming a mile away, because it's so incredibly obvious. But, yeah, instead I fire at the guys behind me, and... I mean, he's still on fire and taking a ton of damage from it, which is great, but... I mean, you probably guessed it, right? I get a nice salvo into him, but at this point he's already fired his torpedoes, and they're heading straight for me. And I hear the beeping and now, okay, that's it. Because when you hear the beeping, it's too late. This ship turns like crap. And so I explode. But I got a significant amount of hits, and I caused a lot of fire damage and a lot of critical damage. Let's look at the stats. Now, it was a defeat, but I did pretty well, I would say. I mean, I did a lot of critical damage, a lot of fire, and I did top our experience with just one kill, which is really nice. And I did over 32,000 damage, which for tier 3 really isn't all that bad. So what is my opinion of the Aurora? Well, it's really hard to say. If Wargaming actually does go ahead and buff HE ammunition to a significant enough degree, then I do think the Aurora could be an amazing ship. But that is a big if. And right now, it is not an amazing ship. Right now, it is absolutely not adequate. It's slow, it doesn't turn, because you have to fire HE ammunition, your damage output just is not there. You lose practically every one-on-one fight, and you're supposed to be a gunnery boat. If you don't win at outright gunnery, then what the hell is this ship good for? I played quite a bit of the St. Louis, and it just performs beautifully. This thing just doesn't. The best thing I could say about this is that it's a support ship. But as I've said so many times, I am not going to recommend support premium ships. They cost real money. They don't stand up on their own. They are only good if you have good teamwork going on. And you just don't have good teamwork in random battles. Ever. Anyone who has ever played any amount of World of Tanks will be able to tell you that you do not get teamwork in random battles. You have a far better chance of opening your kitchen cupboard and a leprechaun jumping out and tickling your nose with his wee-wee. If you've enjoyed this review, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you don't want to subscribe, why not follow me on Twitter? I tweet all of my uploads. If there's any other ships you would like me to review, or if you have any feedback, please leave it in the comment section below. My next review will be for the USS Atlanta. But until then, I've been Eldritch, Master Donkey, and I'll see you in another video.